I'm David Lyons, a 1987 graduate of the University of Richmond Robbins School of Business, and it's my privilege to serve as the president of the University of Richmond Alumni Association Board of Directors. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us for this update with the university leadership, sponsored by the University of Richmond Alumni Association. Normally, you'd have the pleasure of hearing from tonight's speakers in person at some nice reception at a wonderful venue in your region. Normally, our speakers would be sharing news about the wonderful accomplishments of the recent grads, telling you about the impressive incoming class of freshmen, and updating you on exciting projects underway on campus. Normally, my hair would be much shorter, but as we all know, these are not normal times. This is roughly month 3 of the pandemic crisis, and while there's been some more slightly hopeful news recently, we remain deeply concerned for the well-being of our fellow alumni, their families, friends, and the entire Richmond community. And as a parent of college students, one who virtually graduated from University of Virginia on Saturday, I can't tell you how sorry I am that these circumstances force such dramatic change to the student experience this spring. I'm especially sorry for the seniors. I wish that they could have been together on campus with the friends and the professors who were such a part of their journey. I wish they were able to celebrate this milestone with commencement exercises. And for our alums who are looking forward to celebrating the reunion on campus, I wish that you could experience the hugs and the handshakes and the connectivity of being assembled with your classmates. One of the benefits of being involved with the university and living near campus is I get to see firsthand how amazingly bright and driven and accomplished each of today's students is. It also affords me the opportunity to interact with the university leadership and staff. And I got to tell you, it makes me incredibly proud to see how the university has responded to the COVID crisis. While the university's leadership was compelled to make some extremely difficult decisions, it's worked tirelessly to sustain its academic mission, navigate operational challenges, and support the emotional and academic and financial needs of the students. And in support of the mission of the Alumni Association, the school's wonderful alumni office staff continues to look for creative and innovative ways to provide connectivity to the university and to provide an uplifting alumni experience during these difficult times. If you've not had a chance to check out the virtual engagement opportunities, please visit the website or the university's social media outlets. I think you'll find something for almost everyone, whether it's a yoga class or maybe a virtual concert performed by a U of R alum. A few housekeeping notes for everyone before we dive in. As we noted, this is a very different format than we're used to. Obviously, we're meeting virtually. The meeting is being recorded. There is not an opportunity to submit questions during the presentation. However, we have received a number of questions from our alumni in advance of our meeting, and our panelists have tried to incorporate those questions into their comments. So thank you for your questions and your interest. This evening, we will hear updates from University President Ronald Crutcher, Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer David Hale, and Executive Vice President and Provost Jeffrey LeGros. The focus of tonight's discussion will be COVID-19's impact on the University of Richmond, the challenges we face, and the actions we've taken. To begin our conversation, please let me introduce Dr. Ron Crutcher.
Okay, got it. Thanks so much, David. I want to first say thank you for your magnificent leadership of the Alumni Association, not only just for being here, but for your leadership in general. Dr. Betty Neal Crutcher is here with us tonight. I want her to have a chance to say hello as well. Thank you all for joining us. Today, I want to take a moment to provide you with an update and a big picture overview, if you will, of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In particular, I want to reassure you that your alma mater is in a better position than many of the universities in this country, not only to get through this pandemic, but I'm actually confident we'll be a stronger university at the end of this all, when we go back to whatever a new normal is. But it's going to take everyone coming together for us to do that. I also have to tell you that in my 40 years of experience in higher education, I've never experienced anything quite like this. And in fact, I would say this pandemic is probably the most disruptive force in higher education since World War II. And I'm a firm believer that the manner in which a university responds to crises such as these speaks volumes about its values. And I am really proud to tell you that our entire university community has risen to the occasion for this moment. When the full scope and concomitant risk of COVID-19 first became apparent, our top priority was ensuring the health and well-being of our students, our faculty, and our staff. So we first got in motion. We helped our students who were studying abroad to get back. Indeed, a few of them actually ended up staying at places abroad because they were better off there. We also, in many cases, helped to pay for their flights, train tickets, and other unexpected costs. And then when it became clear that we needed to evacuate or move everyone from the campus, we made it possible for a few students, about around 50 altogether, either from outside the country or students from inside the United States whose situations were better here on our campus than going home. We made it possible for them to do that. Many of you helped us during this particular period of time because we relied on some student emergency funds to provide help to our students. And there were many of you who contributed to our Spiders Helping Spiders initiative, which helped to infuse more funds into that student emergency fund. Next, we turned to ensuring our students could successfully complete their academic semester. So when the spring break began, we assumed that students would be coming back after a week. Then as it became clearer that that was not going to be possible, we extended spring break by a year, and we got working on preparing our faculty and staff to provide the academic courses that were needed for these students in a remote manner. And I have to say that I was very impressed at how quickly we were able to do this. I've received lots of messages from students and parents about our faculty and staff efforts, but I'd like to just share one of them from a student. It reads, quote, "I credit the university for helping to teach us that there are times when no matter how we feel, we must do something to help others that is bigger than ourselves. I credit the university for supporting us and making us feel confident that we can do this. And lastly, I credit the university for creating a place that we know we will always be able to call home, even if we are just seeing it virtually," end of quote. I feel really privileged to lead a university where the faculty and staff take the well-being and the nurturing and the education of our students very, very seriously. And I'm also proud at the way that our students themselves have weathered this storm. They have demonstrated the remarkable inner strength that is a hallmark of a Richmond education, successfully completing an unexpected semester of remote learning while experiencing the isolation of the quarantine and in some cases, caring for sick family members. I've been especially impressed with the class of 2020 and how they've navigated this pandemic with such resilience and resolve. Although I'm sure they're very, very disappointed that they were not able to participate in the graduation ceremony live here on campus. And I know you as alumni, David alluded to that, you know about how special the commencement celebrations are here at the University of Richmond. Last weekend, we were pleased to be able to provide a virtual graduation for our undergraduates as well as all of the other students who are graduating. And we promise you that sometime next year, those of you who are on who are seniors, next year we will have an in-person graduation right here on the campus so that you can celebrate just as those alums have in the past. In just a few moments, COO Dave Hale and Provost Jeff LeGros will share with you how we're planning for the future, especially for this fall. But while we're rightly focused on the pressing issues related to the pandemic, I'd like to take just a moment to focus on some recent successes and the remarkable progress we continue to make as a university. I'm especially excited to tell you a little bit about our incoming class, the class of 2024. Again, this year we had over 12,000 applications for this class. The acceptance rate was just under 30%. The applicant pool's average SAT score was 1424. The ACT average was 33, and the unweighted grade point average was 3.81. I'm also pleased to tell you that the university is receiving other national recognitions and accolades, and you heard and read in my quarterly letter a new study evaluating the university's return on investment, which placed us in the top 3% nationally. This study affirms what so many of us already know about both the intrinsic and the market value of a liberal education generally, but particularly here at the University of Richmond. It's also worth mentioning that the university was ranked number 7 in the College Gazette's Best Hidden Ivies list and number 6 in Princeton's Review's Best Colleges for Internships. Now, finally, as disappointing as it was that we had to cancel all spring sports, I continue to be proud of the performance of our athletes, both on the field as well as in the classroom. And as an aside, I'll say to you, last fall, our athletes had an average grade point average of 3.25. That's the highest in our history. But there are two sports I want to focus on. First, our men's basketball team. They ended the season with an amazing 24-7 record. They were going into the Atlantic 10 conference tournament as a number 2 seed, and we're slated to do very well in the NCAA, first time since 2011, and of course, that was all canceled. Second, the women's lacrosse team. They ended the season 7-0, a perfect season, the best start in the program's history, and they ended up final ranking of 12th in the country, which is really very, very impressive. Now, I've been in higher education for more than 40 years, and during that time, I've had to work with in 2 different institutions dealing with some very stressful and situations such as 9/11 and the 2008 recession. And I am confident, I'm really confident that we as an institution are in a better position to manage this crisis than many institutions, as I said earlier, and that we will remain strong and come out of this even stronger. I'm also really confident about our future because of the strength and the dedication of you, our alumni community. Thank you for the many, many ways that you have stepped up with everything from virtual cooking lessons to fitness classes to financial support for our students during this grave uncertainty. We couldn't do any of this without you, and I'm grateful for everything you've done to demonstrate our community's generosity of spirit as we care for one another so that we all may flourish. Now, I want to stop and turn things over to Dave Hale, our Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, and perhaps most importantly, parent of a first year, well, actually going into her second year now, student, but she was a first year last year. Dave has worked tirelessly along with his colleagues in budget and finance, and they've all been working really, really hard to ensure that we get through this in good fiscal health. So Dave, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Crutcher, and many thanks to everyone for taking the time to join us this afternoon, this evening. I am absolutely pleased to have this opportunity to provide you with an update on our financial challenges and the issues associated with the pandemic. As President Crutcher alluded to, this is a profound challenge for all of higher education. And while we are in a very strong position at the University of Richmond, this pandemic is not without challenge from a financial perspective. The first, of course, is uncertainty. It is difficult to make plans for and candidly figure out how you're going to pay for what you do when you're not quite certain how you're going to operate in 3 months. And this uncertainty, of course, is felt by all of you, by all of us, by families, by businesses, particularly small businesses, but it is also felt here and experienced here at the University of Richmond as we plan for ourselves financially. The larger financial challenge we have is our commitment and higher education's commitment to ensure that students can continue to make academic progress. We need to keep teaching, mentoring, and supporting our students, even in a remote scenario similar to what we pursued the last weeks of the spring semester. But if we are in a remote scenario, we expect that we would have significantly lower enrollment, and we would therefore collect far fewer revenue, or far less revenue than we would normally anticipate in a year. Now, by revenue, I mean net student charges revenue. So that's what we collect in tuition, room, and board, less financial aid. And it is our single largest annual revenue source every year. Our second largest annual revenue source is our annual draw from the endowment, and I will talk about the endowment in a few minutes. But if taking a profound hit on the institution's largest revenue source is something that we must plan for, and if we are going to work very hard and are doing extraordinary contingency planning that you'll hear about from my colleague Jeff Legros in a minute, so that we can operate not on a remote basis, but on a residential basis in the fall. But we also must be ready ourselves in case we do need to be remote in the fall. And so I'll come back to that in a minute. I did want to convey to all of you that last week, in fact, the Board of Trustees approved our fiscal 2021 operating budget. That budget is based on what I would describe as a very good case scenario. It is not a best case scenario, and in fact required some very substantial budget adjustments that included a salary freeze for next year. So why isn't it a best case scenario if everyone is back and we're residential and have classroom instruction? Well, we even in this very good case scenario do expect lighter enrollment than we would normally have, though maybe only a 5 or 10% drop, and we've accommodated for that in the budget. Perhaps more importantly, we have substantially increased our financial aid budget to help families with a demonstrated financial need so that the University of Richmond education can remain accessible. We do expect that we will have pressure on our net tuition revenue from our graduate school programs, and our other revenues, which is about less than 10% of the total budget. We are also expecting a decline given the economic conditions. And so balancing that budget, given really year-over-year decreases in revenue of more than $10 million, we were able to do that, again, through a salary freeze. We have pulled back on capital projects on campus, and we successfully implemented a 10% reduction in non-compensation costs for every single school and for every single division across the university. And we will continue to look for other strategic budget reductions if and when opportunities arise. But we have a balanced budget walking into next year, and we're pleased with that. We have trimmed our sails, and now returning back to the remote scenario for a minute, it is a substantial operational risk and something we will be planning for in the coming weeks. We could be facing very hard decisions, almost certainly extensive furloughs of employees if we were to go to a remote scenario. And so then a question should arise, well, wait a minute, what about our endowment? What about our $2.5 billion endowment? And the first thing I wanted to note is to remind folks that our obligation for the endowment is to preserve intergenerational equity. That is, we cannot advantage or disadvantage current and future generations of students, faculty, and staff, as the endowment makes possible so much of what we do today and how we will pursue our educational mission in perpetuity. Said more plainly, the endowment is not a checkbook, it's not a savings account, it's not a rainy day fund. As I saw recently, the president of Princeton University likened it to a lifetime annuity for a university. And, hopefully a lifetime for our great university is in perpetuity. So we have to take care of the endowment, allow for it to provide us with the support we need to continue to be successful, but always be thinking about the future. Now, that's not to say we're not being aggressive with the endowment for next year's operating budget. We began the year, or our audited endowment market value as of June 30th, 2019 was rounding $2.5 billion. We are assuming an investment loss of roughly 10% for the fiscal year. On top of that, we will spend, as we normally do, about $125 million in the current year to support our operations. And therefore, our $2.5 billion endowment is likely to be valued somewhere around $2.1 to $2.2 billion as we begin next year. Normally, if we apply a 5% rule of thumb in terms of how much we spend as a percentage of the underlying endowment market value, we would cut our spending by something like $15 million, cut our support for the operating budget by $15 million to reflect the loss in value this past year. We're not doing that. We are maintaining the amount of support provided for the operating budget this year. We're maintaining that level in fiscal 21. That translates to a spend rate of about 5.7% of the underlying market value. That is not a spend rate that is sustainable over a long period of time, but given the extraordinary circumstances, we think, and our board of trustees agrees, that we should be more aggressive with our endowment support for the operating budget next year. In summary, these are challenging times for higher education. We are working like crazy so that we can return safely to residential education with classroom instruction. And we are also preparing ourselves in case we have to move off of that very much preferred approach to delivering our education. So thank you. Oh, and there's one other thing I did. There was a question whether or not the university accepted CARES Act money, the federal legislation in support of higher education. I do want to report to you that, and the university, based on our enrollment, based on the number of Pell Grant recipients we have as students, we were allocated in round numbers $2.4 million. We have accepted 50 and received 50% of those monies, what we call the first tranche, and consistent with Department of Education regulations, we simply are taking that money and distributing that to our students who have qualified for need-based financial aid. So that $1.2 million we've received is really, we've served, and gladly served, as a pass-through to our students. So I did want to make sure that I addressed that question. Now, I am pleased to turn it back, or actually introduce our provost and my fantastic colleague, Jeff LeGros, to talk about the university's contingency planning efforts.
Thank you, Dave. That's the nicest introduction I've had in a long time. I'm the provost. Many of you may know I oversee the academic side of the university. I've spent most of my time as a professor of international relations, but as an administrator, I can say one of the things I've enjoyed most is meeting alums and hearing their stories, because it's those stories and their lives that kind of fuels me in terms of, hey, we're doing good things out there. This is what we do at the University of Richmond. So a little frustrating not to be with you in person to hear those stories, but always a pleasure to be with the broader Spider family tonight. I want to talk a little bit about the way the semester went and what's ahead. As you know, our students faced many challenges, and just want to say up front how grateful I am for all the support many of you have given through the Spider Emergency Fund that have really made a huge difference in terms of meeting dire travel needs, getting medicines left behind to people, getting them the technology and materials that they need to do their courses. One person had actually in this period had never had an eye exam and was squinting, you know, and so it actually funded an appointment with the eye doctor and a new pair of glasses. And of course, they had a lot of challenges in terms of just getting internet access. They sent out a bunch of Wi-Fi hotspots so students would have access to the internet, and the students were just magnificent, you know, in times of having to, you know, take care of siblings, deal with not great learning conditions, taking care of family members, and sometimes very inquisitive parents being involved. So all those things went on. I know there was a question in particular about international students and how they fared through all this. And of course, I think it's been very difficult for many international students to make their way homes under conditions where home countries were requiring quarantines before they got there, dealing with time differences while they were finishing their remote classes. And I can say the emergency fund made a big difference in those cases as well. And I know for all our students, domestic and international, you know, I've heard stories of students literally breaking out and crying when they heard there would be help for them to get them home because it was such a hardship to get there. So it made a big difference. I just want to say thank you for your support of that. Also, just a shout out to faculty and staff who have been magnificent in these challenges, have gone to extraordinary efforts. Our dean of students' offices, dean of the colleges, done amazing work. Student development people and helping people, you know, deal with belongings and deal with all the challenges of the transitions that were involved in getting home. Our librarians who were getting learning materials and books that were needed by students and faculty. And in general, just our faculty, just the commitment to helping students learn was extraordinary. I ran into professors who would be like, oh, it's really, this is tough work. I'm spending 8 hours for every hour I'm online, but they were doing it. And I think really trying to be there to listen to how students were experiencing it, to support them whenever they could. So shout out for them as well. I'd like to talk a little bit about our planning for the fall. It's a daunting task, but we are up and at it with a lot of energy and a lot of people involved right now. We have working groups involving 75 faculty and staff, and we're working on 3 broad scenarios, and those scenarios are mainly grouped by kind of level of residency. So our full residency scenario, the closest thing we have to a typical year, that might start a little bit late, or it might end a little bit early, to be able to deal with what we might predict in terms of best information when we make a decision on any kind of potential return of COVID. That is typical, but it won't be normal. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a while, that we'll adjust that to fit the circumstances. Second scenario, of course, would be fully remote. If conditions are such that we decided it's just not safe to have students on campus, we would do remote. We will do it well if we need to, but it's nowhere near our preferred option. Preferred option, of course, is to be in residence. That's what where we want to get, and we're intent actually on getting. In between those two is a lower density residence, figuring out a way for people to be in residence, but perhaps not at 100% residency. We call this the hybrid option. Looking at different ways to rearrange the schedule, to extend the schedule over a longer period of time, in different ways that decompress our campus more or less. And we're preparing for the teaching modes that will be needed probably in any of these 3, which might involve, for example, full residency, a little bit of remote as well for those students who can't be on campus. And then, for example, the hybrid scenario, teaching classes both in person and at a distance at the same time, to deal with all students' needs, whether they're on campus or not. So our focus in making decisions on these scenarios is first the safety of our students, staff, and faculty. That's number 1. And number 2, of course, is to provide the signature strengths of a Richmond education. And again, in person, if at all possible. That's our focus. Timeline, rough timeline is maybe have a plan of plans by early June, and by early July, a definite plan that we would be communicating with everyone. Doesn't mean it'll take us to July. It's just that's kind of where we'll be by then. There are, of course, a lot of challenges involved, and one worth discussing a little bit is the one that really connects our full residence to our hybrid middle scheme, which is weatherproofing, building the resilience of our community to deal with any COVID risk in the community. And we have just a very robust effort focused on this that will look at things like decreasing the density of residence halls, isolation and quarantine, decreasing density of classrooms, dealing with dining so that is extra safe, and clinical protocols for treatment, testing, contact tracing, and managing any cases that do emerge. So that is taking a lot of time and a very key part, and we're very fortunate to have our leadership there, Shannon Sinclair, who's not only a brilliant general counsel, she's got an MPH in public health, so she gets it. I think that ultimately the key factor is our difference. It's our relatively small size and the personal attention we give to students and can give to students. It gives us hope and encouragement that we have a good shot at that fall residency. So let me just end by saying thank you again for all the ideas, efforts, and support we've gotten from you, the alums. Really appreciate it, and look forward to crossing paths soon and hearing your story. So let me now just turn it back to President Crutcher.
Thanks so much, Dave and Jeff, for that information. I'd just like to conclude this evening by saying to you that your university is here for you during this challenging time, just as I hope you will continue to be here for both the university and all of our fellow spiders. This pandemic has brought us unprecedented challenges as individuals and as an educational institution, but it has also shown us that even when our web is stretched wider than perhaps ever before, it will not break. It will expand because we are a community of care and compassion committed to serving each other. As we continue to grapple with the challenges of this pandemic, we'd be grateful to you for your continued support, whether it's providing care for one another during an alumni relations event, or offering career support to our students, or providing financial support at whatever level may be possible. Later this month, on May 27th and 28th, we will launch the annual You Are Here fundraising campaign, which we postponed in April. I invite you to participate as your circumstances allow when the university reaches out to you for this important effort. Please know that no matter how you choose to support the university, it will make a profound difference, helping us to fulfill our educational mission and promise to our students. I know the university played an important role in helping you become who you are today, but you also helped shape the University of Richmond. You helped shape us to be the university we are today and the great institution that we will be in the future. So I want to end by simply thanking you for everything that you have already done and will continue to do to meet this moment and to rise stronger than ever before. We're deeply indebted to you. Thank you so much. And now I'll turn it back over to our president of the university, the Alumni Association, David Lyons. David?
Thank you, Dr. Crutcher. Before we wrap up and express our appreciation, one observation and one clarification. Observation is I spend probably, like most of you all listening in, more hours than I can count on Zoom calls, and I think this is without a doubt the first Zoom call that I've been on where there has not been at least one participant with a COVID beard in the picture. So this is a little bit unique. And one clarification, during the call, I was asked what color my blazer is. And I assure you that this is navy and just happens to appear whatever color it looks like on the screen. So I want to make sure folks aren't expecting me to be wearing purple on screen. I do want to just thank our panelists today. I think we are very lucky and fortunate to have leaders at the University of Richmond who have helped us navigate this very difficult time, but importantly, who are willing to share with us in such detail how the university is thinking about moving forward. And I just want to thank you all for being willing to share that with us. The University of Richmond Alumni Association is pleased to have been able to sponsor tonight's virtual alumni town hall. But I think more importantly, we are especially proud to have been able to make a gift to support the Spiders in Need that was referenced so many times tonight. And I think as we look forward, I hope that you will join us in our continued efforts to support the university and one another during these difficult days. We hope to continue to see you in our virtual audiences and the alumni engagement activities that we continue to introduce to our community. I hope we can count on you for your support on Giving Day, as Dr. Crutcher mentioned. And we hope to see you soon, live and in person. But in the meantime, we wish you good health and good spirits, and go Spiders.